Constitution. And the title of today's lecture is Making of the Indian Constitution and Representation of Women in Constituent Assembly, a comprehensive reading. Today's speaker is Dr. Anwar Ravindran, and she is faculty at University of Allahabad, Uttar Pradesh. And Dr. Subhojit Nashkar has kindly agreed to moderate this today's lecture, and he's also faculty in Department of International Relations, Jadavpur University, West Bengal. So I invite Subhojit to moderate the session. Hello, Subhojit. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
please.
start. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So, I think, yeah. So, at the very outset, let me say, Jai Bhim to everyone, and a very good evening to everyone. Uh, we are basically celebrating 75 years of Indian Constitution, mm, uh, mm, uh, hosted by the Center for Dalit Studies, Hyderabad, and IIDS has been kindly sort of partnering with you with this with CDS and other organizations are there: Center for Dalit Rights, National Alliance for Social Justice, Dalit Coalition, People's Campaign for Socio-Economic Equity, Dalit Bahujan Front, National Movement for Land, Labor and Justice. So it's been a 24th lecture, and this is probably Dr. Rehna Mall's second lecture in continuation with the last one. So I wouldn't say much, but let me once again thank Mallepalli Laxmaya sir, who is the patron, and Dr. Raj Sekhar Bhundru. Those are the main sort of motivators and the moving forces behind this series. And of course, I would like to thank the director of IIDS, Dr. Vinod Misra ji, for kindly being here and also to be part of it. So I think this is very important to discuss today, that how the Indian Constitution is not only made, but how the representation of the women in is being envisioned by the Constituent Assembly of India. Not only that, it is a very comprehensive document, but it is also said largely by various scholars from the margin that in fact women representation should have been more, especially the women of the margin, the marginalized women, the Dalit women, the Adivasi women. Their representation should have been more, and the women in general. Even the overall representation is something which is still debatable, but thankfully a feminist advocate, a feminist icon like Dr. Ambedkar have been the chief drafter of the Indian Constitution and who headed the Constituent Assembly. So I think it's something which is very important that we need to discuss today and even in the coming days, in the wake of the kind of underrepresentation in various sectors, in academic sector, in judiciary, in politics, in labor market, in private sector, and so on, and of course in the public sector enterprises all as well. So this is something that probably we need to sort of understand and also interrogate that why despite the fact that representation, which has been a key goal of the Indian Constitution, Article 15, Article 16, Article 14, these have established a sort of equality codes. We have a fantastic uh, provisions for in the framework of directive principles of state policies, DPSP. But despite that, why India is if the various sector, whether it's a government sector, whether it's academia and so on, are facing a massive underrepresentation, and how this, in fact, we need to make meaning of this arrival of the almost 77.5 decade of independent nation of India, that why it is still suffering from underrepresentation, deep underrepresentation on in the important sectors, the sectors which are directly linked with the livelihoods, directly linked with the aspirations, directly linked with empowerment, and of course redistribution and recognition of resources. So this is a deeply concerning issue, which probably once again has resurfaced in Indian political discourse. I'm sure that all of us know that, in fact, the last parliamentary election, general election of India, has been fought on the very issue of Indian Constitution. A call has been given to save Indian Constitution from across the political parties, especially from the INDIA alliance parties, led by politicians like especially the INDIA convener Mallikarjun Kharge. So this has been a very important pitch. If we look at the opposition's sort of parliamentary speeches, whether it's Rahul Gandhi, whether it's Chandrasekhar Azad, whether it's Mallikarjun Kharge, whether it's Kumari Selja. So many of them are flagging the issue of social justice and the idea of representation, and trying to bring them as a very mainstream discourse, which again, to understand that, we need to go back to the Constituent Assembly, that how Constituent Assembly wanted to make meaning of this whole idea of representation, and especially somebody like Dr. Ambedkar, who had made interesting words about women, that he decides the progress of any community by the progress its women have achieved. So, in the light of that framework of Dr. Ambedkar, who have been a very strong advocate, feminist advocate of the women and the women's representation, especially the marginal women's representation, this probably is going to be a very interesting conversation, or rather a lecture, which would be delivered by Dr. Rehna Mol Ravindran. I don't think that Dr. Rehna needs an introduction. She has been a very well-known public face, who have been a regular writer in India's prominent daily newspapers, news portals, whether it's Indian Express, The Hindu, everywhere, Deccan Herald, and so on. So. I think she has headed so many projects of the government, various state governments, and right now she's a faculty at the University of Allahabad. I think she needs no introduction once again, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion, which is going to come from the horse's mouth. Probably, I cannot imagine no one better than Dr. Rehna talking about the issue of representation, recognition, and of course, Indian Constitution. So, with these words, I wouldn't take much time. I think I hand over this, to I pass it over to Dr. Rehna to speak on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Subhajit. You have, in a very short notice, you have actually agreed to be part of this program. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction. And Thank you, Vinod sir, also for being here, and CDS Lakshmiya sir, the director Lakshmiya sir, he has been very kind enough to invite me for this lecture. Last time when I had a conversation with Subhajit, he was asking me like, last time also you had the same topic that you have given a lecture on. Why, I mean, the same kind of a topic. So last time when I had that conversation on the members of the Constituent Assembly, I was giving a very small overview of each and every member. So I couldn't get into the kind of details and the topics that they have discussed in the Constituent Assembly. Instead of just giving an overview of all the uh, remembering the women members of the Constituent Assembly, today I will be looking at the kind of topics and the themes that these members have discussed in detail in Constituent Assembly, and also would be looking at what is the significance that these kind of discussions still hold in contemporary times. I'm sure that again, there is a time limit where I cannot discuss in detail every members and their discussions in the Constituent Assembly. So what I have done is that, considering the time limit, I have taken four women members. And what are the discussions and themes on which they had a debate in Constituent Assembly? I will be looking at Amma Swaminathan, Dakshayani Velayudan, Begum Rasool, and I'll be looking at Durga Bhai Deshmukh. So I will be looking at a few members and what kind of discussions, themes, debates that they got into when they had to represent themselves in the Constituent Assembly. So that's how my lecture this time will be different from the previous one, where I will be having a comprehensive reading of the discussions that they had in the Constituent Assembly at that point of time. I will be starting with Ammu Swaminathan. As you all know, she represented the Madras presidency, and she had played an important role, especially in terms of making the contribution towards the rich discussions in the Constituent Assembly. Uh, One of the major theme on which she had put across her opinion is the fundamental rights and directive principles. So she said that when the constitution is being made, there are two important pillars that we have to emphasize upon. One is fundamental rights, and the second is directive principles of the state policy. She said that why fundamental rights are important, because she said that the equal status, adult franchise, it actually empower the citizen in order to utilize their capacities and faculties to the maximum. And in fundamental rights, she has also emphasized upon how the proposal of the removal of untouchability makes an important point in the fundamental rights. And she also says that the ideas and ideals which are on paper in the constitution are implemented by the people of this country. So along with emphasizing upon fundamental rights, she has also emphasized upon how the people of this country has to take care of the ideas and ideals on the paper, and what is the importance of the implementation of these ideas and ideals. So she emphasized upon how fundamental rights, including equal status, adult franchise, removal of untouchability, has to be taken care of and to be endorsed within the structure of the constitution. And she says that we must not only ensure the rights of every citizen, but also we have to emphasize upon the duties and responsibilities towards the state. Of course, she was an ardent advocate of fundamental rights, but at the same time, what she is also emphasizing upon is that, along with the rights, she is reminding the people about the duties and the responsibilities that they have towards the state. And there she strikes a balance between the rights and duties. And apart from that, she also says that the freedom is not to be used for doing anything that anyone likes. And she, in her Constant Assembly speech, she emphasized upon saying that freedom does not mean license. So you can see a very minute balancing of the rights and duties in constitution, and how she tries to endorse this by saying that we can have the freedom, but it should not lead to a kind of a license. And we all know that in political theory also, how this freedom and license has been separated, and then we draw a very fine line between both, so that we can ensure a kind of an order within the society. So apart from directive principles, fundamental rights, she has emphasized upon fundamental duties, along with an emphasis upon the freedom, which she has identified as something different from license. And she also says that another important point, which she, in her opinion, says that the constitution is something that is very long and very bulky, and that is one of her criticism. She says that the constitution is, to my mind, a very long and a very bulky volume. And she also emphasized saying that she has imagined a constitution which will be a very small volume, which people could carry in one's personal pocket, and not a huge big volume. So this is something on a lighter note. She uh, mentioned about how she imagined the constitution. But of course, something, when we look at today, about how she looked at the constitution, and how bulky it is and how small it should be, it's something that India have, we all know that the Constituent Assembly has discussed in detail. So the culmination is a bulky volume, but somehow, some way, she was not agreeing with the size of the constitution, and she opines that something that she is expecting was a small volume, which somebody could carry in her purse or pocket. And that is something that on a lighter note, you can see when you read her the address in the Constituent Assembly. She also mentioned about the size of the constitution. And she says that the constitution, how it becomes an important stronghold of human rights. And she also says that how constitution as a stronghold of human rights establish the real democracy. And she also says that how it can lead to happiness and prosperity for everyone in India. And again, she emphasized upon how the human rights is a cardinal principle in establishing a real democracy, where every citizen, every individual feel dignified, every individual can enjoy the freedom and the equal status. And she says that how constitution is important in terms of upholding the human rights, and how it can also lead to a kind of a real democracy, where the prosperity of everyone is ensured. And if you look at Amma Swaminathan's the Constant Assembly speeches, in comparison to Durga Bhai Deshmukh, or in comparison to Begum Rasool, it's very short. In that short, in the space that she been given, she has emphasized upon as much as she could. And she has, as I said, that she has emphasized upon fundamental rights, fundamental duties, real democracy, license and freedom. And of course, she has also emphasized upon how the prosperity can be achieved by upholding the human rights that's been enshrined in the constitution. And these are some of the points that she has emphasized upon. And now moving on to Annie Mascarenhas. And Annie Mascarenhas was another important figure in Constituent Assembly. She represented Travancore and Kochi Union. And if you look at her contribution, which is something that very comprehensive, which is also very in depth. If you read her speech in the Constituent Assembly, then you will understand that how in depth she has discussed about different issues. And one of the major issues she emphasized upon was the provincial election. And she said in provincial election, especially, she find it something an important issue in the provincial election, which is that how to elect their representatives. And she says that it is, of course, it is the right of the people to elect their representatives, which is independent of any control, any supervision, or any direction, for that matter, any power on earth. And she said that she is a firm believer of democracy. But what she emphasized upon is that she said that the provincial election should not be under the perpetual tutelage of the center. That means if there is a strong control of the center over the provincial election, the integrity of the provincial people will be questioned. So here comes how she opposes a strong control of the center over the provincial election. And she says that the principles of ethics are more important than the principles of expediency, because at that point of time, the other members of the Constituent Assembly has emphasized upon why should we have a strong central control over the provinces, because many of the members at that point of time argue that it is the expediency that India has got independence from the British colonialism, and at the same time we also had certain communal issues, the partition of India. So, in order to make sure that the sovereignty and the integrity of the India of the country is ensured, we somehow some way need to have a central control. That was some of the other members' argument, because they said that that is the experience of the time, that when India is hurt because of the communal clashes and partition, it's very important for us to have a central control to maintain the integrity of a diverse country like India. But she had differed with that kind of an argument. She said that the principle of expediency is okay, but principle of ethics is much more important than the principle of expediency. And she has argued in favor of an autonomy of the provincial election. And she also says that in the politics is something that is all about ethics. And she says that the politics is not something a computative principle of addition, subtraction, multiplication. So she is also, here comes, we can see that how she is also a critic of the real politic, where the people consider politics as something that based on calculation. But what she's emphasizing is that the politics is not something that of the competitive principle, but it is something that is ethics writ at large. So somehow, somewhere, we have to oppose that centralization of power. And she also says that centralization of power, on one side she says that of course centralization of power and the central control over the provincial election is something that is not desirable, that will of course harm the integrity of the provincial people. She also agrees that yeah, centralization of power is good for a stable administration, but what is more important is that that centralization of power can be done at later stage, not from the very inception of democracy. Again, she it's very important that how she says that the centralization is something that should not be done at the beginning. If at all needed for a stable administration, it can be implemented at later stage of time. Because what she says is that if the centralization is implemented at the very inception of democracy, then that centralization would look more like an autocratic than democratic. And she says that we are living in an age when democratic experience are being tried by many in the world. So the point here is that when she talks about the provincial elections, she says that there should not be any kind of a centralization of power. And at the same time, she also agrees centralization of power is important for a stable administration, but it should not be at the inception of the democracy, because if we are implementing centralization of power, it will look more like an autocratic nation than a democratic. So here again, you can see the way Amu Swaminathan has emphasized upon democracy. You can also see reflection in her words also, that how in Annie Mascarene's words also, that how important is democracy and how democratic experiments should be promoted, especially at the nascent stage of India's nation building. And when she talks about provincial election centralization, she is also emphasized upon the role of Sardar Patel in unifying India without bloodshed. And it seems that she was very impressed by the kind of work that's been done by Sardar Patel. And she also appreciates Sardar Patel for unifying India without having any kind of a bloodshed. And it's very interesting to see that how she explains or describes Sardar Patel as Bismarck of India. She says that the wisdom of the Bismarck of India, whom she consider, I mean, who she refers as Bismarck of India, is Sardar Patel. She says that it's very deep for us to understand that how he has shaped the destiny of democratic India. and also how he has given a safety valve so that they can be integrated without any kind of a fear. And then again, she compares the Bismarck of India or Sardar Patel with the the German ruler, and the Venezuelas in Greece and Sun Yat-sen in China, how they have unified the country. She also says that Sardar Patel has done the same kind of a work, where as an administrator, his wisdom and experience are unequaled. So on one side, you can see she opposes centralization. She says that it is against autocratic, but at the same time, she has also an appreciation for Sardar Patel for unifying India in a more democratic way without having any kind of fear that's been instilled among the people of the country. And again, and if you look at Annie Mascarin also, her contribution, especially in terms of the speeches, is somehow limited in comparison to other women members. But as I said, that she has emphasized upon provincial elections. She has emphasized upon how democratic experiments should be promoted. At the same time, how the contribution of Sardar Patel in unifying India was very much invaluable in terms of creating a kind of an integrity and also sovereignty of the nation. And now coming to Begum Rasool. Begum Rasool, she was representing United Provinces, and she has a very detailed, explanation and also a narration of different issues in the Constituent Assembly. And one of the major theme which she has discussed in the Constituent Assembly was the autonomy to ministers from party affiliation, which is still holds a very significant place in even in today's contemporary politics. And what she says is that the ministry should be strong, and there should be a stable ministry. But at the same time, what she emphasizes is that it should not be subjected to the whims and fancies of the party or legislature to which it is responsible. And she says that India is too young as a democratic country, and we need to create a sense of responsibility. It should be ingrained, it should be developed, and we should have a strong, stable and democracy, of course, which can initiate long range policies, which is completely uninfluenced by the repercussions of any party. So what she emphasized here is that a strong and stable ministry, because India as a young country, a young democratic country, it needs to have more long-range policies. But what is more important what is more important here is that that kind of a ministry should not be flinched by any kind of a party influence or intervention. She says that it should be completely uninfluenced by the repercussions in its party. So what she's saying is that the ministry that has been elected by the legislature should have a long life, and it should formulate its policies not influenced by the party factions. And this what she says that there should not be any kind of an influence of the political party. But in today's time, you can see that how the party policies sometimes take precedence over the government policies or the public policies. Many a times where in governments, when the party decisions or the preferences are taking over the public policies, we ourselves know that how it actually impacts the larger common good or the larger welfare of the people. And when I was reading this particular text, I was trying to understand that how this kind of an argument still holds significance in contemporary India, where how the government should work independent of their party affiliations or party interests, is something that is very fascinating. That how she has emphasized upon how the ministry should be free from the party influence, where you can still say that okay, how she as a Constituent Assembly member is prioritizing the national interest over the narrow-minded or or the small party interest and affiliations that the members are having at that point of time. So next is that another important discussion she brought into the Constituent Assembly was election to Council of States, she what she had argued at that point of time, what she was of opinion at that point of time was that the period of tenure of the Council of States, which is 2 years, which is very short period for a legislator. That was her opinion. She said that the Council of States usually have a tenure of 2 years, and she said is that as a legislator, that short time is very less because somehow, someway, we need to have an experience as a legislator and council of states. So she says that as soon as a person becomes conversant with the business or gets to know about the legislative work or settles down, then by then he will retire. So what she's saying is that it is not very fair because it's slightly a longer period would do justice to the legislature, because by the time he or she gets to know about the business of the house, then they can better contribute, or their experience can be more beneficial for the better functioning of the council of states. So here comes, then she says that it should have been a longer time instead of having just 2 years. And another important thing that she emphasized, Begum Rasool is emphasizing, is that the fundamental rights. And of course, she coming from a minority community, emphasize upon the minority rights as well. For her, fundamental rights and minority rights are very important. And she says that how fundamental rights is very important for a nation like India, because every individual must feel entitled or must feel secure in a country where democracy is in its full swing. And she emphasized upon fundamental rights also because of the fact that India, being a majoritarian country, can have certain kind of an impact on the minority rights. And that's why she says that every citizen, irrespective of their religion, has to be given the rights, and they should not feel insecure in a majoritarian country. And while emphasizing upon fundamental rights and minority rights, in one particular observation that she has made was striking for me, which she said that most of the provisions, been borrowed from different constitutions. For example, India has adopted many provisions from other constitutions like USA, England, Australia, Canada, Switzerland. And it's very interesting because this is something that a kind of a debate even today also. You can see even today's time there have been many people having a criticism of Indian constitution or the constitution makers, saying that this is not something that the constitution we have made, but rather our constitution has been largely borrowed from other constitutions. So still it remains a kind of a criticism against the constitution makers, especially Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. You can see in public how people say that like we have rather taken a lot of provisions from the other constitution. Actually, we copied the provision from other constitution. That's what in today's criticism we can often hear. In that context, and when I was reading this constitution, when I was reading the text of Begum Rasool's the Constituent Assembly speech, it was very interesting. What she's saying is that, there's nothing wrong in borrowing the special provision or some provision from other constitution, as long as the higher interest of the nation and the well-being or the prosperity of the country are kept in mind, which is very important to understand. That what she's saying is that it's not about what all you have borrowed from the other constitution, but what is more important here is that whether these provisions have helped India to achieve the higher interest or the well-being or the prosperity of the country, which is much more important. So you can say that again she has emphasized upon the interest of the nation, which is more important than anything else. And at the same time, she has also made another observation at the when she was mentioning about the borrowing of the provision. She says that the lot of criticism that's been made about Dr. Ambedkar's remark regarding village politics. As we all know that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has been very critical about the village polity because he believed that the villages are the den of casteism. Or it's because you can see the crude the social realities, especially in the village setup. And Begum Rasool also takes up this particular issue, and then she says that Dr. Ambedkar had talked about the village polity, and a lot of people have also criticized Ambedkar's remark on village polity. But what she says is that she entirely agreed with Dr. Ambedkar, saying that in modern tendency, somehow, somewhere, the rights of the citizens are completely undermined in village setup. And she says that village panchayat can be very autocratic. Again, this is very important point that she's trying to put forward, that in a village polity, especially considering the social realities of India, the caste hierarchy, the Brahmanical superiority, she also agrees by saying that village panchayat can be very autocratic. And in village panchayats, the whims and fancies of the privileged caste can be worked out. Again, this is something very striking for me also, that when she talks about the village panchayat can be very autocratic, we can really relate to that, especially for those who go to villages, observe the realities. We can say that, it is a den of casteism. At the same time, though there has been emphasizing upon the village decentralization by the Gandhian idea, what remains reality is that the village panchayat can still be a source of exploitation, especially for the people from the marginalized section. So, 2 points I want to emphasize upon here is that how Begum Rasool has agreed with Ambedkar in terms of adopting the provision from other constitution, keeping the interest of the keeping in mind the interest of the nation, and at the same time, how she has agreed with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in saying that how village panchayat can be autocratic given the social realities of India. And then she says that how the fundamental rights should not be liable to the reservation or to changes by the acts of legislature. Again, very important point. What she's saying is that fundamental rights should not be subjected to the control of the legislature, because she says that the civil liberties of the citizen should be preserved by the constitution, and it should not be easy for the legislature to take them away. So that means, again, she is trying to curb the control of the legislature over the fundamental rights. And we also had seen, especially in the initial years of India's legal history, how the legislature tried to intervene into the fundamental rights, taking away, amending. But somehow, somewhere later on, as we all know, that we have a basic structure of the Indian Constitution which cannot be amended. But you can see that how Begum Rasool at that point of time emphasized upon how the liberties of the citizen should be protected from the control of the legislature, which is also very important and a significant point that has to be highlighted. Another very important, and I think she has discussed it in detail in her speech, which is regarding the question of the reservation of seats for the minorities. She has a very, which we unexpected, like point or the standpoint on this particular question, the question of the reservation of seats for the minority. As we all know that, usually in common for a common man, it is very easy to expect that since she is belonging to a minority community, so she will be in favor of reservation of seats, especially in talking about the political reservation. But against the expectations, she was not in favor of the political reservation of seats for the minorities, which is again very striking for me as well, that how she had taken a different approach towards the question of the reservation of seats for the minorities. And what she says is that she opposes to this reservation idea of minority communities. And she has been emphasizing upon the fact that she says that it is absolutely meaningless to have reservation of seats for any minority. And that's something again very striking. What she says is that we have to depend upon the goodwill of the majority community, And what she says is that since we have to depend upon the goodwill of the majority community, uh, the reservation of seats seem to be quite pointless for her. Um, Again, somehow, some way, she has a lot of expectations from the majority community. She never thought that in a majority community can anytime turn against the minorities, and that's what one of the reason why she had opposed reservation of, especially the political reservation of the minority communities, because she had high hope at that point of time on the majority community people that they will always work for the interest of the minorities. And she also says, while opposing the political reservation of minorities, she also says that she agrees with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and she says that it is for the majority to realize, because Ambedkar had once stated that it is the responsibility of the majority to realize that it has a duty not to discriminate against any minority. She says that yes, Ambedkar was right, that it is the responsibility, it is the duty of the majority community not to have any kind of discrimination against minority. But she also says that she agrees with that, but at the same time, she says that the reservation of the, as far as the reservation of the seats of the Muslims are concerned, she will not ask for any kind of reservation. And she also says that the interest of the minority and majority are absolutely identical, and it is identical because they both are the citizen of India. And she says that she expecting the majority would deal justly and fairly with all minorities, and somehow somewhere again she's emphasizing upon how they will how the majority community will deal with the minority more fairly. So in that way, she says that she will not consider this question of political reservation for minorities, because she thought that the majority community will have a kind of a better fair treatment towards the minority community. I think if we look at her expression in today's context, somehow, somewhere she was wrong, because considering the political realities of this time, we can see there is a sense of unfair approach or unfair attitude or the treatment of the communitarian of the majority community towards the minority communities in India, which is a reality. Maybe her reading somehow somewhere turned wrong at this point of time, if you look at the political realities of today's India. So again, another important discussion that she had was on naming of the parliament, which is again very striking, very noticeable. That what she says is that the parliament, the name parliament shall be changed, and what she's saying is that the legislature of the union shall be called the Indian National Congress. I think she had more, of course, she was more influenced by the International Congress. And what she's saying is that the parliament name should have been changed, or she is suggesting that the legislature of the union should not be called as parliament, but it should be known as Indian National Congress. Because why she is saying is that the party that actually instituted the struggle for the freedom of the country must be remembered by the people. And she also says that the term Congress is not something new, because it has also been used for the American Parliament. And she says that therefore it is okay, all right. It is in the fitness of things that in the Constitution of India, if the parliament has been replaced by the National Congress. Again, she being a member of the Congress at that point of time, very quite natural for her to give such kind of a suggestion where, how the parliament shall be named in the name of a party which has actually instituted the freedom struggle. And another important point which she has emphasized was upon the India's membership of Commonwealth. What she emphasized was that she said that our army, our defense organization, they've been all built upon the British lines. So remaining in the Commonwealth will always be for the advantage of India. And that's what, again, her opinion on whether India should remain with the Commonwealth or not. And moving on, another important thing that she had discussed was that against a separate electorate. As I said, she was not only against the political reservation for minorities, she was also against a separate electorate. Of course, she had also her own explanations and justifications why she had opposed a separate electorate, because there was an amendment that's been moved by Mr. Ismail from Madras, and one of the major proposal of his one of the major point put forward by Mr. Ismail was that there should be an introduction of a separate electorate. But Begum Rasool said that in a secular state, separate electorate have no place. She made it straight that um, the idea of a separate electorate is not something that is fit for a secular state. And she says that, therefore, the principle of joint electorate shall be accepted. And also, in a joint electorate, um, one thing is that there should not be separate electorate. There should be a joint electorate. Even in a joint electorate, reservation of seats of minorities will be meaningless and useless. Because what she says is that the candidate returned on the joint votes of the Hindus and Muslims in every nature cannot represent the point of view of the Muslims only. So, therefore, what she's saying is that reservation is completely, entirely unsubstantial. She says that even in a joint electorate, if there is a kind of reservation, it is impossible for the candidate to represent one particular interest of the community. So, in that way, she says that in a secular state, separate electorate is impossible. It is insignificant. Even in a joint electorate, reservation is something that is unsubstantial, because it is impossible for a candidate from the joint electorate to represent the interest of one particular community. And she also says that the separate electorate is a self-destructive weapon. Because why is it self-destructive weapon? Because she says that this particular idea can actually separate the minorities from the majority forever. So in that way, it gives no chance to the minorities to win the goodwill of the majority. This has to be again emphasized upon. What she's saying is that the separate electorate is a self-destructive weapon, because it always separates the minorities from the majority. There will not be any space for intermingling between both the communities, and also if at all there is a separation, that will not be for the goodwill of the minority. So what eventually will happen is that it will lead to a kind of a spirit of separatism and communism. And she says that separate electorate will culminate in separatism and communalism. So separate electorate should be done away once and for all. Again, then she says that there is still a feeling of separatism, but at the same time, when she says a separate electorate must not be there, she also take a realistic view of the fact that separatism still prevalent among the communities in India, but that must go. And she says that the existing separatism cannot be addressed by a separate electorate. It has to be addressed differently. The separatist tendencies that is existing among Indians at that point of time must go. And she also says that it is the interest of the minorities that we have to try to merge themselves into the majority community, and it is not going to be harmful for the minorities, because what she's saying is that in the long run it will be interest of the goodwill of the majority. It will be interest of the welfare of the minority, that there should be a kind of a merging of both the communities, doing away with all kind of separatist tendencies in for a secular state. So again, what she's saying is that, when she talks, because as I said, when there was a question of the reservation separate electorate, she had detailed way she gave her justification and explanation. And she also says that, the history says that, it was very difficult for the Muslims to live in the country, but at the same time, what she says is that there was a danger full of insecurity among the Muslim communities. Their very honor was at the stake, the loyalty is being questioned. So it created a kind of a frustration and mental depression for her, the kind of the suffering that the minority communities in India had to face at that point of time. But what she's saying is that we want to now finish the past. We want a new page that should be turned over, in which all communities living in this country would feel happy and secure. So what she again saying is that yes, there is a history. She is not invisibilizing the history of the suffering of the minority communities in India, but what she's saying is that past should be finished, and we should create a kind of a new era of the communal harmony between the Muslims and the Hindus, and which is of course very much holding a important significance in today's India, in contemporary India. And what she is also saying is that the kind of fear in the minds of the Muslims, it cannot be done away with, like political reservation. But what she is saying is that somehow, somewhere, they can be included in the government services. That is something that, again, though she had a problem with the political reservation, but she also says is that, somehow somewhere we have to include them into the government service, so that they also feel integrated with the Indian public. That's what, again, she's emphasizing upon the reservation though, in the public services. So Begum Rasul, of course, she is very important figure in Constituent Assembly. Her idea is very important, not only in terms of how she emphasized upon questioning the village panchayat, emphasized upon political reservation, emphasized upon joint electorate, and how the communal harmony shall be established. These all points are very, very important, even in today's time as well. And moving on to the next important figure, the women figure in Constituent Assembly, who is Dakshayani Velayudin. Dakshayani Velayudin was a representative from Madras constituency, Madras presidency. And as you all know, she was the only Dalit women member in Constituent Assembly. Dakshayani, if you read Dakshayani Velayudin, it's very interesting that how she has also put across her ideas. She had a lot of confrontation with the main figures of the Constituent Assembly, including Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, but she was fearless. She was very much courageous enough to put across her points, and she was very clear about what she spoke, and that is very much evident in the text also. When you read Dakshayani Velayudin's speeches, you can see that how diligently she has dealt with the topics in front of her. Yes, Dakshayani Velayudin was more impressed by Gandhi's political idealism and his social passion, and she also emphasized, she also expresses that how she was more influenced by Gandhi's political idealism and social passion, but at the same time, she had some differences with with Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and which is very interesting to read. She says that there is um, one important themes that she has emphasized upon was that there is no need of a separatism, which is very interesting. She says that there in Indian Republic there are a lot of barriers based on caste or community, and she also says that the Harijans, they have their own suffering, but what she emphasizing upon is that the scheduled caste, whom she referred as Harijans, again, that's a word that's been given by Gandhi to scheduled caste people. So she says that Harijans will be safe in a Republican state of Indian Union. And she also says that though they had problems, they will be safe in a Republican state of the Indian Union. And she says that they will also be the rulers of the Indian Republic. in one, or I know in a they will also be the rulers of the Indian Republic. Um, you know, somehow, somewhere they will have that, opportunities and spaces to be the rulers of this country. So what she's saying is that she was very much confident about India and India's political setup, India's leadership, that though there are problems for the scheduled caste, they will become the rulers. So what she says is that I therefore appeal to the Harijan delegates of this Constituent Assembly that they should not harp on separatism. Again, this is something very interesting because we all know that many of the leaders from the scheduled caste being critic of the nationalist forces at that point of time, but Dakshani Velayudan has been a critic of those leaders who been, I mean, who had a kind of confrontation with the nationalist forces at that point of time, and then she gives an appeal to those members saying that the Harijan delegates of the Constituent Assembly should not harp on separatism. Means, like, they should be integrated to the nationalist forces. And then again she explains, when she says that we should not promote any kind of a separatism, what she also says is that Mr. Churchill had he eloquently talked about the question of the Harijans, and what she said is that though Mr. Churchill and the British government says that we are responsible for the life and welfare of the scheduled caste of India, she put across a question on them. She says that when Churchill or the British government says that we are concerned about the welfare of the scheduled caste, Dakshani Velayudan asked a question: what has the British government done to improve the social status of the Harijans? And she explains, saying that we what we want is the immediate removal of the social disabilities. And she says that the removal of the social disabilities can be done within the independent socialist Indian Republic. And what she's saying is that the freedom and equality status of the Harijans can be achieved within India. And what she says is that our freedom can be obtained not only from Indians, if our freedom can be obtained from Indians, not from the British government. So again, she is discrediting the British government, which claims that we are concerned about the welfare of the scheduled caste. What she's saying is that no, we don't need your support, we don't need your help, but we can achieve the freedom and equality within India. And that is where she says that the nationalist forces have contributed to. And another important, very interesting, I'll just finish it off maybe in 15 minutes. Another important thing that she emphasized upon here is that, she gives a message to Ambedkar, and she also makes a personal appeal to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to join the nationalist forces of this country. And that's what exactly, it's a verbatim that, what she says is that, let me make a personal appeal to Dr. Ambedkar to join the nationalist forces of this country. He is the only leader of the Harijan community, and his non cooperation with the nationalist forces is a great tragedy to the Harijans. His cooperation with the nationalist forces will enhance the emancipation of the Harijans. Again, you can see that what she is appealing to Ambedkar is that you be with the nationalist forces. You should not have a kind of the separate agenda, because the freedom and the welfare of the Harijans can be attained within the larger framework of the of India's the constitution. So what she's saying is that Ambedkar should join hands with the nationalist forces, because she's also emphasizing upon in the context that Ambedkar has been a critic of Gandhi and Indian National Congress in terms of not adequately addressing the interest of the scheduled caste. But what Dakshani Velayudan is saying is that no, she had a lot of hope on the nationalist forces, especially the Indian National Congress. And what she says is that the leaders of Harijans, especially Ambedkar, should be part of the nationalist forces instead of being separated from the being separated from them. And another important, interesting critic that she has made is a critic of the communist. And she says that again, she was a huge critic of communists. She says that instead of emancipating the Harijans, the communists have actually exploited them. And she says, what she says is that they have promised, especially the communists promised pieces of land to Harijans, but somehow, someway, they have taken away from them because of the feudal structure. And what she's saying is that the Communist Party is not something that, they are not going to be the saviors of the Harijans. Somehow, somewhere, we cannot depend on such party for our emancipation. And our emancipation only lies in the national forces, which are represented in the assembly. So in that way, what she's saying is that we should not also rely upon the Communist Party for the emancipation of the Harijans. The way she criticized Dr. Ambedkar, she also criticized communists, saying that they have to be the part of the nationalist forces, which is largely represented by the International Congress. And apart from that, she also talks about the representation of Harijans as Hindu candidates from Muslim provinces, which is also very important. She says that the Harijans consider themselves with the Hindu community, and so that they have all the right to represent the Hindus in the Muslim provinces. So what she's saying is that we have every right to represent the Hindus in Bengal or the Hindus in Sindh or in the Punjab. But basically what she's saying is that the Harijans are not separated from the Hindu community. They have very much the right to represent the Muslim provinces as well. So, and she says that at the same time, she also sends across a message to the caste Hindus. What she's saying is that it is the duty of the caste Hindus to see that the promises that made should be put into the practice by including Harijan in the list to represent the Hindus. So again, there is another message that's been sent across to the caste Hindus, saying that it is their duty to make sure that the people from the scheduled caste or the Harijan should also represent the Hindus in the Muslim provinces. Another important point she emphasized upon was freedom from forced labor. And she also talks against economic exploitation and economic backwardness. This is a very important point that she emphasized upon. She says that it is unfortunate that the section of these people still have certain economic backwardness. There are many people who still work without getting any kind of a remuneration. And she also says that they have every right to demand the wages, even though they will work day and night, so that they should have the equal economic opportunities and they should be paid equally. And she also says that economic exploitation must be completely eliminated. Another last important point that Dakshayani Velayudhan has been emphasizing upon was that the separate electorate. Again, as you could see how Begum Rasool opposed the political reservation and the separate electorate, you can again see Dalit women opposing the separate electorate and reservation for Harijans. Almost, they have a justification almost on the similar lines. What she had said is that Dakshayani Velayudhan, while opposing the separate electorate and reservation for Harijans, she said that I could see some of the members who are putting across this idea, especially she has taken Ambedkar's name. She says that Honorable Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had proposed the separate electorate, but she's also saying that she's very surprised that a member who came as a result of the joint electorate moving an amendment for the separate electorate. So she says that it's very contradictory that, a member who is coming as a result of the joint electorate is opposing joint electorate and asking for a separate electorate. She said that that is quite surprise for her. And she also says is that she also says that I do not know why another member to take up the responsibility of asking for a separate electorate. So she says that she is actually addressing Mr. Nagappa. He was the one who actually moved that amendment at that point of time. And when she said that she is amused that a person who is coming as a representative of the joint electorate asking for a separate electorate, which is actually she is referring to Mr. Nagappa. And she says that she was very brutal, if you could use that word. She was very brutal. What she had said is that, Mr. Nagappa said when they come to the assemblies as a result of joint electorate, they may not be coming with the votes of the community, so they are not entitled to represent that community. So basically, what she's saying is that, then they should not be a representative of the joint electorate. They should not have done that. Rather they should, if at all they are asking for a separate electorate, why are they representing a joint electorate? So again, she was very, very critical about separate electorate. And also she says, what she says is that, the Harijans, or the scheduled caste, somehow somewhere, we should look at their emancipation within the larger context of, the larger context of the Hindu people, where she says that integration is something that is very possible. And she says that, one of the reason why she opposes separate electorate is not only that, she thinks that an emancipation can be possible within the larger Hindu community. Another reason why she is opposing the separate electorate is that even a candidate who is representing a separate electorate can be bought by the political parties. What he's saying is that, what is a guarantee that if a candidate is representing a separate electorate, will be very committed to the community? Somehow, even the candidates can also be bought by the political party. So that's how she has a cynicism against separate electorate, because she says that it is not at all sure that the candidates who are representing the separate electorate will be the true representatives of the community. Because what she's saying is that, the scheduled caste Hajjans, sometimes they are the economic slaves of other people. This is what exactly the verbatim. She says that, they can be the economic slaves of other people, because there is no meaning demanding either separate electorate or joint electorate or any kind of electorate with this kind of a percentage, especially when there is a kind of an economic slavery. There's no point of asking for a separate electorate. So she says that she's not in any kind of she's not in favor of any kind of reservation. She's not in any kind of a favor of a separate electorate. Again, that's very, personal of her. That is her own personal opinion. It can be wrong, it can be right, but largely that was the point that she has emphasized upon, especially when it comes to, the scheduled caste, their emancipation, and their separate electorate. And lastly, she was an ardent advocate for equality, and she spoke her mind against untouchability. I think I'm almost running shortage of time, and the last one, Durga Bhai, she was representing from Madras. She also emphasized upon lot many issues, especially appointment of judges of provincial high courts. She has emphasized upon establishment of the high courts in newly created provinces. And also, she emphasized upon the commitment. She emphasized upon the efforts that's been put by other feminists, especially Muthulakshmi Reddy, in prohibiting the Devdasi system. She was, emphasizing upon that in Constituent Assembly, that how the efforts of the women, especially to remove the Devdasi system, which was much prevalent in Madras presidency. And also she says that how, we should open up, the Hindu religious education institutions. And also, I'll just wind up some of the
Yes,
important
Granny.
some of the important
I think
themes.
I think somebody must be removed. There is a spam has
No, no,
entered into the.
continue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Animal continue. I
Okay, sir.
will
Okay,
take
sir.
this.
So I'm just concluding that, Durga Bhai Deshmukh, she has emphasized upon the constitution remedies for fundamental rights. She emphasized upon reposing the faith on youth, and also very importantly, she had ensured the neutrality of governor. She said that how the neutrality of governor should be emphasized upon, and we all know that, the role of the governor, how it is a contentious issues even in today's time, especially in the central state relations, you can see the cases of the Kerala governor earlier, how there was a lot of contentious issues in the central state or in the federal structure. So you can see that even at that point of time, Durgabai Deshmukh had emphasized upon how the neutrality of governor should be ensured. And also she talked about the protection of children, the protection of the youth from exploitation and abandonment, and also she has emphasized upon the limitation of individual freedom. So I will just stop here. I have almost covered, five women constituent assembly members and their contribution. I think, Subhajit, I'll stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think before I give my comments, I'd like to take questions. If there is any question or comments that uh, uh, the ones those are in the meeting room, they want to ask questions to Dr. Ravindran, they can. It's been a very brilliant glimpse into the women constituent assembly member. I think you anyone who would like to ask a question can really shoot a question. Just to unmute and ask a question. If there is no question, then we'll wrap it up with some concluding remarks. Okay. There is a question. Mm.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir. Sir,
Abhijit.
sir, should we wrap it up? Should we conclude this
No, no,
lecture?
no, 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 no. Somebody will ask. So,
Somebody will ask.
first, my response is I think it's an excellent presentation. I think not, before any place I didn't listen the topic and the issues. It's a very cornered thing. Nobody focused and nobody studied and nobody researched on this issue. I think I congratulate Rehanamon. I think she did a very well presentation and she did a hard work. I think it should continue. Then reflections. What is the objective thing she presented? What were the people of Constituent Assembly belongs to women group? I think it should be to go more and more platforms to discuss the things in the now in India. So many people they will talk about the feminism and all those things. So nobody what they did in the Constituent Assembly, what their contribution, nobody knows. I think this is the first of its kind. To my concern, I didn't listen. I thank you and congratulate to continue work on this issue, and we have to reflect on their views. So what are the uh, what are the impact nowadays? What are the relevant today? What they said in those days? It's a very happy. I'm very happy. Thank you, Rehanable. I got into late in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Anybody is
Should
there to?
Yes.
Hello, sir.
Okay. Ah,
Hello,
बोलिए sir.
hello, sir. I'm engineer Ahmad Rose from Himachal Pradesh. Sir, ma'am, there is still negligible representation of women in legislative assemblies and of course in parliament. What measures are to be initiated to have a sizable representation of women in Constituent Assembly?
Okay,
Ma'am?
so the representation of the parliament you are mentioning about, no?
Ravi, Ravi, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Continue.
as far as the representation of the women in the
Dela?
national legislature is concerned, there are many studies that has been putting some light on the in the low representation of women. I think some of the points that we have to look upon is that how there should be a social restructuring, especially in terms of encouraging the women and their presence in the public spaces. And secondly, we can think about how the political parties should come up with certain gender inclusive policies. And then moreover, we should have a more democratic movements where we can include the more women, so that there will be a raising level of consciousness, and also like confidence building measures, especially from the state part. So it's something that we need to think very holistically, having the role of the society, the state, the individual, the political parties all together, putting together, I think we can ensure the representation of women in national legislature.
Okay, thanks, madam. My second question is that are fundamental rights more important than duties and responsibilities of women in housemaking and sacrament to the coming generation?
Now, fundamental rights more important than the duties. Okay, I think that I will have a very balanced approach there. I think as much as fundamental rights are important, the duties are also important. That's what Dhamma Swaminathan also says, that when we look at the fundamental rights, we have to uphold the fundamental rights, but at the same time, we also have to be responsible citizen in order to make sure that others also enjoy the freedom equally, but at the same time the state also does its function. I think there should be a very well balance between the fundamental rights and duties. I think for it's not only for women but for every citizen of this country.
Thanks, ma'am. You said, ma'am, as this separate electorate is harmful. To maintain harmony, it creates, you see, separatism. You said it, but the question arises here that was Pune Pact insignificant? It was raised by the Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
I think somebody has to remove them.
Who is that?
Yes, we are continuously removing them.
Please remove them immediately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who is that? Who is that? Hey,
Yes, sir. I think, sir, regarding the separate electorates, I haven't mentioned that, and it was not my personal opinion that separate electorate is actually promoting the separate tendencies, but I have discussed a separate electorate, especially in the context of how Begum Rasool and Dakshayani liked them. What was their point on separate electorate? It was not my personal remark on separate electorate, but I have discussed how Dakshayani Velayudan as a Dalit women member from the Constituent Assembly and Begum Rasool, as a member of the minority communities, how they were not in favor of the reservation for those community members, and also how they oppose this idea of separate electorate in favor of joint electorate. So that was not my personal remark, but as far as the debate is concerned, we all know that Ambedkar had also propounded this idea of joint electorate. But I think we need to have more, detailed discussion on that, to understand the nuances and all. But it was not my personal remarks are on a separate electorate. I think that something has to be discussed maybe in some other lecture, having a proper research. Yeah, so that was not my personal remark. It was, the remarks by Begum Rasul and Dakshani Vilayathan.
Yeah, I think, is there any other question that we can take? Mm, Can we take one more question uh, before closing this session? Uh, I think, sir, Mallepalli sir, should I conclude this with your permission? Or maybe Vinod sir is there, Vinodji. Can we conclude this? I think it's already 8:34. So I think uh, yeah, yeah. I think we should conclude. So I think I once again, as moderator of this session, thank Dr. Ravindran for delivering again such a incisive lecture, taking us through the entire representational voices in the Constituent Assembly, and especially in the given socio-political context, how in fact Daksani's principles and advocacy, which is basically grounded in the idea of reforming the society, which is untouchability ridden, can only be realized when the state, the society, and especially the privileged upper caste, they sort of try to build a kind of accountable framework so that anti-caste principles and policies can be implemented at the ground level. So, because while we are talking, Dalit student Shivam Sonkar is facing blatant caste discrimination at Banaras Hindu University. He is not getting PhD admission despite cracking a post just because he is a Dalit and he secured a position in the unreserved category. So they don't want to uh, uh, allow a Dalit to Dalit's right to education, in fact, to put it this way. And in fact, I would mm, end with these comments that in fact Daksani's legacy with Daksani Velayuthan only. Daksani's legacy is not only a relic of the past, but rather it serves in fact as a blueprint for the resistance against social hierarchy and in fact untouchability, who in fact in the Constituent Assembly asked the chairman of the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Ambedkar, that our chairman is from untouchable community, so we have to stop and bring some sort of legislation to stop untouchability, so that untouchability does not persist. So in fact, so in her speeches in the Constituent Assembly is constantly calling for basically social equality and ending social inequality thereby to and in fact ensure political representation by confronting the systemic inequalities that even persists today. But her legacy is again is being marginalized. There is no record keeping of the constitutional history, and it's not an accident, we know for a matter of fact. So Dakshanis, we need to remember Dakshani Velayuthan more to confront this unsettling truth that lingers around Indian democracy, which is still deeply unequal, deeply antisocial, deeply unethical, and so on. So we should celebrate Daksani Velayathan's defines more and celebrate her birthday, her Mahaparinirvana and so on. So with these words, I once again thank uh, Dr. Rehna. I thank Mallepalli sir. I thank Dr. Vinod Misra, and CDS Hyderabad, IIDS, and other partner centers for hosting this series of lectures. We are all also going to celebrate Dr. Ambedkar's birthday on 14th April, and I hope that the nation celebrates and gives the due and also fulfills his dream that is still unfulfilled. With these words, I once again thank everyone for joining us and listening to us, especially listening to the lecture delivered by Dr. Rahanamal Ravindran. Mm, Thanks. We conclude the
Thank
session
you,
here.
Subhajit. Thank you so much for moderating this session. Thank you, Dr. Hannah. Thank you, and see you all during the next lecture. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank,
Yeah.
thank
Yeah.
you so
Thank
much,
you,
sir.
dear.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
It's better we end this meeting.
Yes, yes. Hi, Ramu?
Yes, it's better we end this meeting. I don't know, it's getting spam.
Yes, yes. I know. Just
Yes,
please go ahead.
yes, yes.